Good almost afternoon, my friends. Welcome to today's training on getting clarity getting clarity, period. Especially if you're dealing with codependency, or a survivor of narcissistic abuse, or highly unemotionally available relationships. So I'm Marshall Burtcher. If you're new to me, I help codependents rediscover their well-being and happiness by healing the trauma bond, coming to know, love, and live who they are, and create happy, sustainable relationships in their lives. Before we get started today, I need to get this shared out to the community really quick. The community is your safe haven here on the internet, where you can find guidance, tools, and support that help you reach and thrive beyond codependency and reconnect back to your intrinsic self. Restore your sense of safety, sanity, and self to you so that you can succeed and thrive in your life, because frankly, we don't have to suffer in codependency. It's not an identity, addiction, something that we have to cope with. It's fundamentally a survival strategy that our brain developed in order to handle neglect and abuse and chaos in our dominant relationships. So you can find that link above on Facebook, below on YouTube, and if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. I'm going to click the post button. And now we'll get started. So today we are talking about reclaiming your real power from codependency. Ultimately, what we're really doing is undoing what's called learned helplessness. So learned helplessness is this concept of not being able to influence and impact our world, influence and impact others in a way that would help us meet our needs. Instead, we're stuck. We're stuck in an experience that results in powerlessness because we can't advocate for our needs in an effective way. We're unable to meet our wants and fulfill them. We feel defeated frequently in our experience because we can't get to what we're looking for and what we need in our world. Now, this is a product of the kind of situations we're dealing with. So if we're dealing with someone who is unresponsive to our needs, our feelings, or our wants, they're critical of our needs, feelings, or wants. They don't respect them. They don't attune to them. They don't identify them. They're not available for them. Our efforts to try to get them to see us, to value us, to connect to us will fail. And when they fail, we believe that that's because we're not good enough. There's something intrinsically wrong with us. So we collapse internally, typically towards shame and powerlessness or helplessness, and we give up. And then we go through a rejuvenation where we try again to get them to be different. And we try that by trying to change ourselves, by trying to change them, by trying to control outcomes, by trying to shape expectations. And we get in this tug of war of power, because really that's what's going on in the background there. Hi, Kaya. So in relationship to power and helplessness, they are a hand-in-glove relationship. We're feeling powerless and helpless in our world. It's because of how we're approaching our two types of power. So we have two types of power that we operate with. One's called personal power, and one is called power over. So I'm going to switch this. Oops, sorry about shaking the screen there. Switch this over here to the really cool app, the drawing thing. And I'm going to go back here because what is going on? Today in tech. Today is so much fun. All right. The last week on tech has been like all my fears. All right, so we should be switched over now in the screen. I want to make sure it's done it. It's done it. Yay. Okay. So we're going to try this little tool out I got this weekend. All right, so we have okay, we're going to come here. Personal power. Okay? Yeah, right there. So personal power is very limited. There's a term for it, a technical term called internal locus of control. And there's 4 things I define in that space. So thing number 1 is feelings. Feelings are in my power. I manage them. I regulate them. I care for my feelings. So I'm going to put a split here in the middle. I'm going to do other power. Okay? Because we need to differentiate this. So other people are responsible for their feelings. They're responsible for managing their emotions, regulating them, meeting them, advocating for them, that kind of thing. You are responsible for yours. Number 2 is desires. You're responsible for your desires. They are responsible for their desires. In class, I often start to define this as a yard. Okay? Their yard, your yard. So this would be their yard, this would be your yard. Number 3, we have personal power over our choices. These are the things we choose. These are the things we do. These are the things that we value. This is where we're dedicating our focus and our energy to. Well, it's the same for them. They have power over their choices. And then, ultimately, it's number 4, action. We have power over our action. They have power over theirs. Now, in codependency, the fun thing that happens here is we try to take responsibility for these things. We're naturally powerless here. We're powerless over the other person. This is why you feel powerless. This is why helplessness shows up, because you're trying to control things that you don't have natural power over. You're not supposed to be able to control these things. That's not how it's designed. Your control, your power is right here. This is your personal power. This is your yard. This is what you manage. Right here in the middle is the boundary. We're not controlling how they feel, their desires, their choices, or actions. We're observing them. We're acknowledging them. And we're fundamentally working to respect them. Respect as in acknowledge it. We don't have to tolerate it. We don't have to live with it. We can make a choice and an action that tells us to leave. That would be our boundary. But fundamentally, when it comes to power, personal power is your focus, and that's the only focus. You let others live in their yard with their power and manage their feelings, desires, choices, and actions on their terms. This gets you into a place where we move into other powers. So I'm going to come up here. I just find the marker. There we go. And do this a new one. I'm not going to save it. All right. So this leads us to the second form of power we have. And it's called power over. So power over has 2 types of functions. Function 1 is called influence. Right now, you're influenced. I'm influencing you. Other people are influencing you. Marketing is influencing you. And that influence is to request that you utilize your power. Let's see if I can write here. Power in a certain way. So you're going to use your choices and your actions, desires, and feelings in a certain way for a certain outcome. Okay? So this is a normal, healthy form of power over. We want to influence someone. We can influence people by asking. We always gain consent. So it comes to consent and privilege. Consent, Marshall, and privilege. My poor hand today. All right. So we do that through asking. I'm going to write that a little clearer. We do that by listening. Wow. And then we do that by creating clear, direct, and simple agreements. So that's healthy communication here. So then the real fun starts, and this is where most of the pain shows up in toxic relationships. It's called coercion. I don't know if I spelled that right. Probably not. It's probably an S. Yeah, that looks right. Coercion is force. And force is exacted through threat. And that creates pain. That destroys trust. Influence is built on trust. This is built on force. This is how we utilize our personal power. So our personal power can translate into influence. That can translate into, I'm going to change colors, can translate into an outcome of mutual benefit. Okay, that would be like meeting a need or a want that you have. Down here in coercion, it's a one-sided benefit. It's the cookie. Benefit. Yeah, the cookie. This is where manipulation throws in. This is where gaslighting happens. This is where ultimatums show up. This is where a lot of times attachment distress can motivate force and threat in some way. Clingingness, stuff like that. It's an effort to control the other person's choices and actions, feelings, and desires, rather than influence it and gain consent. Up here in influence. So I'm going to switch the screen over. If I can get my mouse to work today. There we go. So this is what we're dealing with in power. This is what's showing up for us when we deal with this power struggle. Our job here in healing from codependency is to reclaim our power. It's to reclaim the sovereignty over our feelings, desires, choices, and actions, and really anchor ourselves in that spectrum, anchor ourselves in that world. Allow that to become what is real for us so that we can connect that to our power to influence others in a healthy way through consent, through asking, through listening, and through creating direct, clear, and simple agreements. And this is how we neutralize the impact of power or coercion, power over in that form, in a relationship, because now we're moving towards consent, we're towards understanding, and towards mutual benefit rather than coercion, control, force. This is how we do it. And this teaches us that we actually have power. Now here's the trick. Because in relationship, especially in codependency, we tend to think that we've got to make the other person change, that that's our job. That's us being in their yard, trying to influence their feelings, desires, choices, and actions. In a healthy relationship, it's about understanding what the person does. So if they don't consent to change, that's something we get to accept. And then we can make choices and actions based on our feelings and desires in response to that. This is where we find honesty in relationship. This is where we find compatibility, and that's where we find incompatibility, so we can make proper decisions for our well-being going forward. When we're working with people who care about our well-being and they have a shared mutual interest in the relationship with us, we're going to feel very powerful because our power is going to be utilized in a way that influences them. They're going to be influencing us in a consensual way so we can get our needs met. We actually experience that it's not who we are that was the problem. It was the people we were dealing with that were the issue, and how we were dealing with them depending on the context. Toxic relationships, it's a little bit of both. When we refine that skill and move into our power, then discern people who actually align with us in compatible ways, power doesn't become a big issue. It's something we have to keep a mind on. It's something we need to be mindful of, and we have to keep in check, because sometimes power can be co-opted by entitlement and obligation, and then we think we're entitled to something from the other person, and they're obligated to give it to us, and we move into a coercive action against them. That would be a violation of autonomy and consent and boundary. So gotta keep that in mind, because sometimes we do that, we don't even know we're doing it. So we're going to be really, really kind with ourselves there, but very mindful of it. Further, when it comes into power, we're talking about impact. How did my personal choice and action impact the other person? In healthy relationships, that impact is valued. It's respect. It's like, oh, I see I had this impact on you. I apologize. I know last week I've had some impacts I didn't intend on people. And so they voiced it to me, and I took accountability, received accountability for it, and said, yep, that's okay. I took ownership. So this is mine. Responsibility for it, and outlined what I would do differently, or they outlined what they'd like instead. I agreed to it. That's a correction. That's a repair. That's how this works. Because power isn't I get my way and you get to live with it. It's, especially in a healthy relationship, it's more like, what do we both need? What do we both want? How does that work? How can we get there? So in narcissistic relationships and toxic ones, power is about coercion, about I get my way and you get to live with it kind of thing. That's not a relationship. That's a dictatorship. So be mindful of that if that's what you're experiencing in your world. That's not something you're necessarily going to be able to change. It's not something you should be able to change. That's something they choose to be. Your job in that experience is to accept them. Like, that's what you're choosing to be. How do I feel about it? What are my desires? What do I need in my world? What choices and actions follow from that? And go from there. That allows you to make more honest decisions about relationships that are based in a practicality and a reality rather than a fantasy and a hope. So guys, there you go. That is today's discussion. Reclaiming your power from codependency and undoing learned helplessness. This is how you do it. It's a very simple process. It can be complex in its application. It really depends on context and nuance and getting some experience in there. Let me know your thoughts below in the comments, what you've learned with today's training. And remember, I appreciate you. Thank you for being who you are and for showing up. And remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. And go out and see how you're utilizing your power. Are you trying to control someone else's feelings, choices, desires, and actions? Or are you respecting yours? Where's your focus? If it's outside of yourself, come back to your yard, identify what you feel, what you want, and then what choices and actions you're committing to, and then do them. That's how we do it. Oh, the other component here, so if I still got you here, is consequence. With choice and action, we have consequence. We don't get to choose it. We get to discover it. A lot of times with power over, especially in coercion, we're trying to control an outcome to get people to do things a certain way. That doesn't work very well, does it? If it really worked, we would be in very different worlds. Now, what happens is we learn we are either harmed in somebody doing this to us, or we are violating boundary and consent with somebody else. When we're in our power, when we're in our feelings, our desires, our choices, and our actions, we are anchored in a relationship to what's called natural powerlessness. Natural powerlessness is the things we can't control. Other people's choices, feelings, desires, and actions. Also includes consequences that we inherit with our choices and actions. If we want to have a lot of peace of mind in our world, it's about coming to a positive relationship with receiving the consequence, whatever it may be. So what this does is it shifts our power from trying to choose and act in ways that will get other people to do what we want or get what we want, to choosing and acting in ways that advocate for what we want and seeing what happens. That seeing what happens, that discovery element, sets us free from trying to control outcomes and puts us back in our natural ability to discover outcomes, discover results, and then discover how to refine that process so we can get the results we're looking for in a way that's aligned for us and for those that we're dealing with. So there's that. So really it's about, I'm choosing this, I'm taking this action, and here's the consequence I'm seeking, the impact, the outcome I'm looking for. And if I get that, I've learned that I can get it that way. If I don't, I need to reevaluate, see what I can adjust in order to get that result. So it's an exploration process. It's exploratory, it's discovery, it's a practice of revelation that way. So there you go. So you got a second half on that one. Appreciate you guys. Remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. If you're looking for help in this, looking to go deeper into reclaiming your power and orienting yourself into a way of taking action and choice in a way that results in things you want, join the Heal Yourself strategy as we go deep into that. The link is above on Facebook, below on YouTube. Appreciate you. Be safe out there, and I will see you guys in our next training video.